Hi, everyone. I hope you've had a really good time at PLOTCON so far. I landed late last night, so this is technically my first day of PLOTCON, and I've had a complete blast so far. So I'm really lucky as a speaker because I get the coveted post-lunch spot when everyone's bellies are full and everyone's kind of feeling a little sleepy, getting a little lethargic. So I always like to kind of infuse some energy into the audience, and I'm going to do that today. So I'd like everyone to close their laptop if they have it open, or put down their phone if they've got it out, and I want everyone to stand up. This is good for you. And then we're going to raise our hands to the sky. Really go far. All the way. And then we're going to lean to one side, whichever side you want to lean to. Just follow the crowd. And then we're going to lean to the other side. And then we're going to put our hands back and stretch out our chests like we're superheroes. All right, and then we're going to bring our hands to our sides and just do a little shake all around. Then we're going to sit down. And I just helped you burn a few calories, so that's great. So today I want to talk about notebooks. And I think we all have a special notebook in our minds. Maybe it was the first spiral-bound, wide-ruled notebook that you got before you started your first real day of school. Maybe it was a really nice moleskin that you brought for your first day of work, or a really nice notebook you got for your first day of college. Or maybe it was something completely different. Maybe it was the first time you used a Jupyter notebook and saw your code running inside what was a web app. Now, the notebook in and of itself is not special. It's what it represents. It's a symbol of writing and of permanence, and of that feeling that you can create something that, until it's obliterated, will last forever. And the need to write and draw things that last forever is not new. Writing and drawing are forms of communication, and the desire to communicate with each other has been with us since the dawn of our species. And although communicating our ideas with each other might be difficult at times, we've always had an intellectual renaissance or innovation that made it easier for us to share our stories, our thoughts, and our ideas, whether it was the printing press or the computer. And regardless of these innovations, before we called ourselves data scientists or engineers or researchers, we called ourselves storytellers, and we took pride in it. And although the latest obsessions in our field revolve around databases and frameworks and technology, I think it's imperative that we return to our roots, to the one thing that we really want to do with all of these technologies, to the real reason you folks are here at this conference. And that's the need to storytell. I want to make the narrative king again. How can we do this? With a fairly new project called nteract. And over the next couple of minutes, I'm going to take you through a tour of the technology behind nteract and of the principles behind nteract. And I want to start off with this brief description. nteract is an open source, desktop-based, interactive computing environment. So I thought up this phrase when I was setting up the project's Twitter account, nteract.io if you want to follow us. And it's sort of become a staple in a variety of our blog posts and articles and some of the grants that we write to get funding. nteract is an interactive notebook editor, but let's dive into that a little bit further. What does nteract mean for you as a user? Well, first, it means a couple of things. nteract is completely desktop-based, and in a lot of contexts, the desktop is still king. When people think about being productive or creating content, they think about the vast suite of desktop-based tools that are available to them. And nteract is one of them. It sits right in your desktop, and it provides a seamless experience that allows you to click to open files, to organize your notebook using your operating system's file manager, and to access any other desktop-specific functionality. It's right there where you need it. And once you open up a notebook, you're relying on the best of the Jupyter ecosystem that Fernando covered earlier. So this includes the ability to connect to a variety of kernels in many different programming languages for your analytics or software work. And since the notebook documents that you create in nteract are the same IPython notebook format that you would use in the Jupyter notebook or any other interactive notebook editor, you can share them with colleagues and use them as you see fit. And finally, you get access to a variety of user experience features that provide an unparalleled notebook experience. I always have such great joy when I'm creating notebooks in nteract because it's so wonderful to use. So for example, you have the ability to do things like stick a particular cell to the top of the notebook, or hide the inputs and outputs of code cells if you're using the notebook in a teaching context. And we do this because we really want to delight the user, and we've done more than that. So with nteract, sharing is as easy as a couple of clicks on the menu. We also provide interesting features like the ability to have output displays with live updates. Not only is that super fun, it's also practical in a variety of applications around parallel and remote computing. And those are some of the features in nteract. I don't want to discuss all of them because I want to urge all of you to go and download the tool and use it yourself and see where it fits in. Report bugs to us, because there will be bugs, because it's software. Also report features that you're interested in seeing added into the software. Now, I talked a little bit about some of the features we provide in nteract that are kind of unique. I want to talk about what makes all of this possible. So nteract is written entirely in JavaScript, and so it has the opportunity to take advantage of JavaScript's really rich package ecosystem that, when employed properly, has the potential to make your life easier and wonderful. So we heard React mentioned earlier. We use React as the framework for our front end, and tools like RxJS and Redux for back-end functionality. And although these are web technologies, they're packaged for the desktop using Electron. So the result is something really awesome. We get to take the best of what is happening in the cutting-edge web world and the best of what is present in the stable and well-tested desktop ecosystem and combine them together in the nteract application. And another great thing about using these tools is they're kind of well supported in the industry. So we're standing on the shoulders of giants when we use them. And the effect is that we have a smaller code base, which reduces the number of bugs that we have to deal with, which means we have less headaches and we're a happier development team overall. And because we're using technology that's kind of well established in the industry, the people who come into our project to contribute actually get the benefit of learning to use a tool that they might eventually get employment or a career out of, so it's practical for you. And that's kind of the present state of nteract. I want to talk about what's next, because that's really exciting stuff. We want to go above and beyond anything else, and we'll take a peek of some of the initiatives that we've got planned. So the first is the ability to provide a clean interface to connecting with remote kernels directly from the desktop. This is going to be particularly helpful for teams that collaborate and share compute resources. And on this front, I'm really excited to announce here at PLOTCON for the first time ever that nteract's received a small amount of financial funding from the Gordon and Betty Moore Foundation to support this work. Thank you. This is majorly exciting because it's actually our first foundation funding for nteract. Hopefully there will be more to come. It goes to show that we are a viable project and that individuals who are constantly looking at what's cutting edge in the industry and what projects are good to fund are interested in investing in us, which makes me happy. Also, they liked my grant, which makes me personally happy. So I mentioned earlier that the nteract front-end system is written entirely using React. Ultimately, we'd like to create an ecosystem of composable components for things like the code cells that are used in the notebook and the markdown cells, so that anyone anywhere can quickly assemble their own notebook environment using the building blocks that we provide. And while we're giving you that, we might as well give you real-time collaboration. A lot of the work that we do as researchers and scientists is not done in isolation. It's done in teams. And so real-time collaboration is vital as a feature in a tool like nteract. And we've started to tackle this problem head-on by developing solutions to some of the parts of the Jupyter specification that make it a bit hard to integrate with real-time collaboration, like widgets. And if you're interested in hearing more about that, I recommend you talk to our resident mad scientist, Kyle Kelly, and he'd be happy to explain more. And when you're working in a team, you also need transparency and accountability. And so integration with Git, by extension tools like GitHub, is really important for the research team. And we want to treat Git integration as a first-class citizen in nteract, so that's also on the roadmap. And if you're interested in seeing what else is on the roadmap, I recommend that you go visit our initiatives repository. In this repository, we keep track of grants associated with our different initiatives, as well as brief summaries of what the initiatives are. So if you're kind of interested in seeing what the future is for nteract, this is like a good repository to star, watch, love, think about all the time, so on and so forth. And most importantly, I think it's really important that you share your own idea for the things that you'd like to see in the notebook. So whether you're going to join us on Slack or just talk to us at our booth back there, or hit us up on Twitter, if you have an idea or a feature for something that you'd like to see in the notebook, we want to hear what you're going through, and we want to see if we can build or outline a solution for it. So don't hesitate to share your ideas with us. And the last section of my talk is something that I added pretty recently. I wasn't planning to dedicate any time to this, but in the context of recent events, I kind of want to have a serious discussion about this. I want to talk about something that we kind of shy away from as engineers and scientists and people with analytical minds. And I want to talk about the social and political impact of a software like nteract and Jupyter. And I specifically want to talk about it in the context of what happened 2 weeks ago. Don't worry, I'm not going to get it political. I don't want to talk about polls or statistics or predictions. I want to talk about the real crisis that happened that day. And it's a crisis that we as scientists, researchers, and thinkers of our society are responsible for. It's the crisis of ignorance. It seems that no matter how much research is going to be produced on climate change and reproductive systems and the history of government regimes and social injustice, there's a plight of ignorance in our world. Some of that information isn't getting to people. Remember earlier that I said one of the most consistent themes in human history is the need to communicate with each other, and that sometimes that gets difficult for a variety of reasons, misunderstandings between two people, misalignments of vision. But when it gets really bad, there's always a renaissance that happens that kind of takes us out of that area of miscommunication and misunderstanding. And I think we're long overdue for another renaissance that's going to help aid the way that we communicate with each other as people. And I'm going to propose this treatise and this mission for our community. So our mission over the next few years should be to make the dissipation of knowledge from creators to consumers easy and delightful. And when I say consumers, I don't mean the consumers that we usually build for in our community. I don't mean other researchers or engineers. I mean for the general public. It's time that we stop building things for each other and start building things for the people. There's no use in creating knowledge if it's never going to reach the people who need it most. And For too long, science has been trapped in these ivory towers and research labs, and it's time for us to take on the biggest challenge of our generation and break it out and bring it to the people. And until that happens, let's be honest with each other. Open science isn't truly open, and open source isn't truly open. And I think that interactive notebooks are going to play a key role in this renaissance. And that's for a simple reason that I presented earlier, is that stories have an impact. Narratives have an impact. Interactive notebooks allow us to create these rich, computationally backed, narrative-filled notebooks. And if we can get these notebooks beyond the hands of our colleagues and our friends and into the hands of the people that matter. The middle-aged woman in suburbia wondering what's in her ear. The young, little forgotten scientist in an underserved school. If we can get the work that we produce into their hands, that's when we'll really have impact. And I refuse to believe that the general public isn't interested in learning about the details of cutting-edge research or fascinating work that we do. That's simply a distortion that's been manufactured to keep people ignorant. We saw this after the election. A large amount of people were subscribing to publications such as Mother Jones and the New York Times. People want knowledge. Curiosity is human. People know what you want to work on. And I know it's a tough challenge. I'm asking to change something that's been this way for centuries. But I think if we try and change it, it's going to be worth it. This is particularly relevant to me because at nteract, I don't think we're just building software. That's not what this is. We're trying to fundamentally change the perceptions of what an interactive notebook can be. And that's a hard thing to do. I'm not going to pretend that I have the answer to this problem because I don't. But I think if we focus our energies, we can address it. I believe that the average IQ in this room might be the highest in New York City at this time, minus some like Wall Street boardroom or something. My dream is that one day, every elementary school in America is going to have a computer lab. And on every one of those computer labs, each computer will have an installation of nteract. And young children everywhere are going to use nteract to learn about things like science, statistics, math, and critical thinking. And those same children will one day grow up to make something great. And this is my own vision for nteract, and it's rooted in my interests for science education and social good. But I encourage you to form your own grand vision for nteract and any other tool that you're working on. A grand vision for what a world with truly open knowledge and truly open science would look like. And if you're interested in nteract in particular, I encourage you to join us. The background of this image is a collage of individuals who've contributed to nteract in a variety of ways, whether they were code contributions, document contributions, someone who asked a question on Slack, someone who joined our dev meeting, someone who just like hung around with us and made us feel less lonely on a Friday night of hacking. All these people consented to have their images used, so don't worry about that. I would love to see one of your faces on here because ultimately nteract is about the community of people, not the software itself. Now, if you're not a company, let's say that you're a person. If you're not a person, if you're a company, I confuse the two because sometimes I turn into Mitt Romney on stage. And you'd still like to help us out, I'd encourage you to do what Plotly and Domino Data Lab have done, which is make a financial contribution to the project. In addition to my work on nteract, I also co-organize the PyData Chicago chapter. PyData is an international community of individuals who are interested in the open source scientific Python ecosystem. And so a lot of my work involves asking and sometimes begging companies that use open source software to make a financial contribution to NumFocus, which is the 501c3 profit that acts as a physical sponsor and a business management supporter for projects like nteract, matplotlib, bokeh, all of those awesome things that you love and use. And I am heartbroken and saddened by how often companies are not willing to make a donation to free tools free and open source tools that help them make millions in profit, billions in profit. And so I really want to thank Plotly and Domino for putting their money where their mouth is, which is something that so few companies are willing to do, and committing themselves financially to excellence in open source. And I especially want to call out one special person, and it's Jack Parmer, who's the CEO of Plotly. He's been in the back of the room all this time. I've had the chance to work really closely with him over the past 6 months since Plotly's decided to make a financial contribution to nteract. And I can tell you he's the most kind and generous and genuine person that's ever existed. If you want to know about how much Plotly values its commitment to open source and how it sees it as more than just a company value, all you need to do is look at the way that Jack's been interacting with nteract over the past 6 months. It's something that very few executives are willing to do, and I'm so happy that we have somebody like him in a high seat at a company. So thank you, Jack. And if you too want standing ovations or like claps for your company or for your CEO, then I really do truly encourage you to make some sort of contribution. If you or your company care about the future of open science, of open knowledge, of data science, this is the best place to put your money and get the most value out of it. We have tons of intelligent people like Thomas Caswell and Cal Kelly who will be like 10 years worth of 5 engineers in like 2 days. So they're really good guys and gals. And together, whether you're volunteering your time, your money, your passion, or your awareness, let's all do great work. Thank you. I have a couple of minutes to ask questions, but I'm going to kind of make it fun. You can ask a question if this is your first technical conference of sorts, or if you are a woman or an underrepresented minority. And then everyone else can just come talk to me in person afterwards. Don't be shy. Or I could just get off stage and we can like have a dance party for 8 minutes.
My first tech talk, or tech conference.
Yay! Welcome to the community.
Thank you. And I love the email. Safia.
Thank you. Yes.
So I actually see like notebooks being a huge like social change when it comes to education in a lot of ways. I also just think technology and like, the internet in general is going to be helping just educate a lot of people who just don't have access to actual good education systems because open source education is awesome. But how have you been actively approaching schools, approaching just after school programs, and what have you been doing to actually use like endorse, interact, or just open source?
Yeah, so I haven't started working with nteract specifically and students, but I have used Jupyter Notebook to teach like 8-year-olds, 9-year-olds software programming, which is kind of a traditional and expected use. I'm really hoping that one day it'll make the leap from just teaching people software to teaching kids things like math and science and analytics and statistics and all the stuff that's really important to know. I think to make that jump from it just me being like on workshops and stuff like that, we need to kind of bring this technology and break it out again of the ivory tower that we have and from our small network of kind of graduate students and researchers and scientists and bring it to elementary school teachers and people who focus on technology for pedagogy. So yes, I think the jump that we need to make is to have individuals who are in the school system and have been teaching kids forever be aware of things like the Jupyter Notebook and its merits instead of coming to them and being all like, this is a thing that we made and you should definitely use it. We kind of want to have them gain that awareness of its impact and importance.
Given that, how do you democratize understanding this kind of software? Because I sit more in the business intelligence section of analytics, and this is not foreign to me, but it's still outside of my skill set. So if I'm an elementary school teacher and I see this, it could be very, overwhelming or intimidating. So
Yeah.
how do you go about that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that was actually one of kind of the founding principles of nteract, was to make it a tool that would be more accessible to people with more business intelligence skill set. So when we look at things like the fact that it's desktop based and that you can use it in the same way that you use Word for the most part, the way that it integrates really well with things like rendering maps inline and managing code. The idea with nteract is to create something that's advanced enough to be used by the experts productively, but also simple enough to where someone with a non-technical mindset could pick it up. Ultimately with this, you do have to know programming. That's kind of a given regardless of how hard we work around it. But I think given the general trends in public education and the investment in technical education at the federal government level, and also at some local and state governments, it's safe to assume that in the future, teachers knowing how to program is going to be something that you can expect. And so then the question becomes giving them a technology and a tool that's easy for them to use and to work with.
Hi, just a quick comment after what you just said. First of all, thank you so much for the amazing, inspiring talk.
Thanks.
And I think that precisely this divide between technical and non-technical, we have to transcend it as part of this renaissance that you call for. Because, Leonardo da Vinci was not just a scientist or just an artist, or precisely it was a renaissance because we combined the best of all brains, all parts of the brains in the human body. So I think that yes, teachers are intimidated. I also have friends who try to start and teach maths with the Jupyter Notebook, and it's not very well received with their colleagues, etc. But we have to take leaps and break those stereotypes that programming is for just a certain kind of people, etc.
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot of kind of social stigma and perception politics that we have to break free. If you could come to our booth afterwards, I would love to know what was inhibiting about the Jupyter Notebook for your teacher friends adopting it in their classrooms.
So thank you for the great talk. My question is mainly focused around mobile. So I don't know if it is a given that moving forward, a lot of the people that we would want to reach are going to necessarily have a desktop or be using it a lot of the time. Do you have some maybe beginnings of plans to make a mobile app that's interactive?
So this is an interesting question. I mentioned during my presentation the bit about composable components and the idea that eventually people will have all the building blocks that they need to build their own notebook environment. And all of our components are React components, so you would be able to build, I'm hypothesizing here, a kind of a mobile-first web app that holds a Jupyter Notebook using the components that we developed if you wanted to tackle that market. It's not on our personal roadmap, but it's the kind of thing where we're hoping to create the tools necessary to allow other people to build it out and make that an easy process for them. I can tell a knock-knock joke. Yeah.
So while you were talking in that latter part of your talk, I was thinking more about how to share information about kind of existing adults, not necessarily from the education perspective, though that's obviously really interesting, but say ongoing adult education. Do you have thoughts on how we as this community, scientists, et cetera, engineers, do you have thoughts on how to share that information with the public instead of just ourselves? All I can think of is kind of if you do something that's interesting enough and you share it online and then you hope people tweet it or something.
Yeah.
Beyond that maybe, or more details about that.
Yeah, that's a great question. I also have 30 seconds to answer it, and I don't think that I have the authority or time to make a well-reasoned response, but I do think that this is one of the things that if we put some time into it, we could solve. I think a fair chunk of it is perception politics too, of people just feeling that they can't approach scientific work because it's overwhelming. And so a lot of it is breaking down that notion and showing people that scientists can explain their information to you in an approachable way. And then afterwards, we can focus on building the technology that would facilitate that interaction between scientists and citizens. I am out of time, but you can talk to me in this space.